Ravens sort of sudden 27-23 loss at the Meadowlands at the hands of the New York Football Giants. They're on to the Jets this week, but we'll be dissecting this thing all week. Luke Jones is here with us. As always, our Kimo Sabi and coverer of all things Ravens. He'll be out on the field in Owings Mills on Wednesday, on Thursday, on Friday, as the Ravens try to explain this thing away. And, Luke, I made the list. Suggs and obviously the injury in the pass rush in Doomerville, coaching mistakes, penalties, big time, Flacco inconsistencies, the defensive line and the lack of the pass rush overall, the offensive line and the sort of the moving parts there. The one thing we haven't talked about, and we've done a couple of rather lengthy segments, is Marty Morningwig. I mean, they fired their offensive coordinator a week ago. This was an all-new sort of operation. For whatever reason, we have sort of moved that to the bottom of the scope of all of this. But moving forward, I would say there were more signs of life from the offense, even though it's clearly a work in progress.
Yeah, I thought it was, relatively speaking, and I asked Mike Wallace about this after the game, and he kind of said it'd be a lot easier to talk in this manner if they had won, but there were some things you like to see there. The running game commitment was better. I overall I was satisfied with what we saw from in terms of a commitment to the run. I mean, you'd like to be a little more productive than what they were in terms of yards per carry, but it's not as though it was so bad that you have to abandon it. You can talk all you want about running the ball, but if you're only averaging 2.7 yards per carry, it's really tough to do that. So,
but also, there were 3rd and 27s, man. You know what I mean?
Sure.
They found themselves in some ugly D&Ds.
Yeah, that's a big part of it, and that was a big part of it for Mark Trestman, even though I still don't think he was committed to running the ball anyway. But, he averaged 3.8 yards per carry. That's fine. Certainly saw deep shots that we had not been seeing with the same level of consistency in previous weeks. So I thought it was a solid first start, just looking at that, a solid first game. It was a decent start in what is a work in progress because of the offensive line, because of the injury with Steve Smith being out. There's clearly a lot of work to be done. There's no doubt about that. But for a first game, taking over as the play caller, taking over as the offensive coordinator, not having 3 of your starting members of your offensive line, I give Marty Morningwig a passing grade.
Fair enough.
I don't know if I'd give him an A, but I'd certainly say, okay, there were some glimpses there of some things I liked, some things that you can continue to build on now. And as I said to you before this game, even for him, this is a case of. And I was saying the Ravens, in my mind, they really needed to try to win both of these games. Clearly, they didn't win the first one, so you can't do that. But you need to go into the bye at 4-3. I mean, losing on Sunday against the Jets, 3-4 with that second half schedule, not looking good. But if you get a win, you're 4-3. You have a bye week to get guys healthy, hopefully, and it gives him a chance to really sit down and try to fine tune some things. Try to come up with some new concepts, some new wrinkles that you can add into the system. I mean, he's not going to completely change the system in season. That's just not going to happen at this stage. But can you add?
Nor should it when it's already tailored for Flacco, kind of, sort of, right?
Yeah, well, I just mean in terms of the Ravens' offensive system right now. You can't. You're not going to go from the West Coast to Air Coryell or the run and shoot or anything crazy like that. It is what it is. The terminology is what it is at this point. You can fine-tune some things. You can add some things. You can take some things out. You can take that week, which they always do, to self-scout and really try to hone in on what has worked, what hasn't worked, what they haven't tried enough, and what they've leaned on too much. I mean, those are the kinds of things that you'll do anyway, but it's going to be a huge opportunity for him during the bye to do that. So in the meantime, you got to try to beat the New York Jets, a team that clearly hasn't played very well this season, and a team that I don't think too many people were high on them to threaten New England or anything crazy like that. But certainly I think people thought they'd be a little bit better.
Well, they looked like they took a step forward last year.
Yeah. I mean, they looked like a team that had a chance to be a wild card contender, and they haven't looked that way so far. So, but you look at where they are, you look at where the Ravens are right now. I mean, you're going to be talking about, regardless of what happens for them in their Monday night game, they're desperate. They're desperate for a win. You go to 1-5. I mean, the Ravens they've been there, done that last year. I mean, the season feels like it's over. So, they're going to have to feel, they're must win at this point. Ravens have to feel must win, knowing what lies ahead after the bye week. And for Morningwig, it's just a matter of trying to patchwork this thing together as much as you can, not knowing if you're going to have Smith, not knowing if you're going to have Yonda. Stanley practiced late last week. You hope that's a sign that he could be ready to go. But at the same time, is it in his best interest to play if you think that another 2 weeks will put him in really good position with that foot, that it's not going to be an issue after that? So this is what you have to weigh when you're John Harbaugh, when you're Marty Morningwig, to try to figure out what can we do to make this work enough to get a win. And clearly that applies on the other side of the ball as well, with some of the injuries and the issues they had in the secondary. But you got to balance trying to figure out the long-term prognosis of your team from a health standpoint with the reality of you really need to win. I mean, you go 3-4 into the bye
on a 4-game losing streak,
knowing what lies ahead, knowing that you're going to stew over a 4-game losing streak. Season's not over, but it might have OV if you're spelling it out like a game of horse. So it's clearly as close as it gets to must win. You got a little bit of a mulligan from a standpoint of Pittsburgh lost, Roethlisberger hurt, so they look like certainly coming back to the pack. Cincinnati's had their issues, lost against New England in Foxborough, not shocking on Sunday, but a loss nonetheless. So, the division's still wide open from that standpoint, but as I said, Ravens got to take care of their own house at this point, and got to get well. You got to figure out how to get better, because, it's not all about health, as we've talked about at length. With Marty Morningwig, saw some things I liked, but still a lot of room there to need to improve.
As you pointed out, very difficult to do this with the offensive line being in tatters, and I don't think they played poorly, right? I mean, early on they were having trouble protecting Flacco, but the penalties make it poor, right? I mean, it's just as simple as that. But technique-wise, where they were, responsibilities, they didn't get Flacco blown up, looked like they were working. They didn't look like they were the first time at the rodeo working together, which they kind of sort of are.
Yeah, I mean, it was, I wouldn't say they played well, but hey, they had a chance to win. I mean, we go back to this. I mean, it
was the defense that gave up the fourth and long.
I mean, it wasn't as, it wasn't as though they only had 125 yards of offense and they didn't convert a third down after the first quarter, like last week, for example.
They were good enough to get things done.
Yeah, there was still, they were able to get some things done. I mean, it's not ideal. I mean, anyone who's expecting them to go out there and play really well, I don't know what you're.
Without Ronnie Stanley, without Marshall Yanda, if it was that easy, they would jettison those guys and just, have a bunch of fourth-round draft picks play, right? I mean, it's not that easy.
At some point, you do. It's not an excuse; it's reality. That's why I picked the Ravens to lose on Sunday, quite frankly. And if you want to blame me for that, fine. But
sure.
I picked them to win the previous 2 weeks, and I was wrong. So shows what I know. But
that means you're a good guy. You turned into a bad person.
I know, right? But it's just, this is where they are right now. So you have to make the best of things. I mean, there were quite a few occasions over the course of the game that. They used 2 tight end sets. They used 3 tight ends at a few different points. I mean, that's that helps you with your running game, and you got to try to commit to the run more so with when you are having these kind of issues with health on the offensive line. I mean, Joe Flacco still threw 48 times on Sunday. That's less than ideal, but the Ravens did have a lot of plays. I mean, they ran it 26 times. That's 74 plays right there. That's a pretty high volume. But
8 of them were penalties, or 9? I mean, a lot.
Yeah, I mean that's that's the big thing. I mean the penalties that the offensive line committed. I mean you can't have that. You can't have holding penalties. You can't have situations where you're a false start. I mean, those are drive killers, and they've had way too much of that this year. It's a big part of the narrative. I mean, they've had penalties in general, but I don't have the breakdown in front of me, so I'm just going off of how it's felt. It's felt like way more offensive penalties, and they've had some penalties on defense. And you think back to jumping off sides a couple weeks ago. I mean, they've had some bad things happen like that, but overall, it's been way more penalties offensively and way more penalties on the special teams. And it's just those are the types of things that unless you're really, really talented, talking like most talented team in the league, you're just not going to overcome that stuff. I mean, you're just not. They're not talented enough to be that mediocre on the little things like that. So, I mean, it's just it's something that I don't know how much of it's the coaching staff. Certainly if it's a lack of discipline, then that falls on the coaching, but it falls on the players too. I mean, these guys have all played football a long time. You know what proper technique looks like.
Yeah, the coaches also didn't. They sent them in over the play to get 18 inches. They couldn't get 18 inches.
Yeah, I mean it's
that's the truth.
Yeah, so
players got to play.
It's a challenge right now, and I didn't expect them to be dynamic with their offense with Morningwood, but because it was their first game anyway, and then the injuries on top of that, particularly at the offensive line. So we'll see. It's something that you hope gets better. Certainly, you pray it doesn't get any worse. Can't get much worse, quite frankly.
From an injury standpoint, it can always get worse, but you wonder, how much worse could it get?
Yeah, I mean, and I guess the point would be, some of your backups could get hurt then, and then at that point, it's just like, well, okay, but you're hoping you get some guys back, and then you can keep guys on the field. I mean, it's tough. I mean, it is when you're struggling to play well anyway. And then you have the injuries. We saw this last year. I mean, it's what turned a really terrible start and really a lot of frustration into almost a punchline because the injuries just piled up the way they did. But offensive line has to get healthy. There's just no ifs, ands, buts about it. I mean, it has to be that way. You can talk about coaching guys up as much as you can, but you got to have talent. You got to have guys who can play, and the guys that can play, if they're not on the field, you're turning it over then to the likes of guys like James Hurst that mean well, try hard, but you just know that very much inferior in terms of overall ability.
All right, we're going to talk more about the DB situation this week. Obviously, the Suggs situation and all the coaching decisions. We'll be talking about it all week long. Luke at WNST.net. He's also Baltimore Luke out on Twitter. I'm Nasty at WNST.net. I'm available, very available individual. Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Snapchat, Instagram, streaming live on Facebook Live, as well as our YouTube WNSTV channel. Anything you miss, you can find in the Buy a Toyota Audio Vault 24 hours a day from anywhere in the world on your mobile device. Just download the TuneIn Radio app. We do come in crystal clear there. Morning Newspaper is brought to you by Planet Fitness and PlanetFitness.com. Still $10 a month to get in the best shape of your life there. And last but never least, breaking news as we share with the Suggs information on Sunday night. It's all brought to you by Coons Ford of Security Boulevard. Dennis Kolatzos will be here on Thursday, 3 until 5. Driving you home. I got plenty of sports radio to do for you. We are WNST.net, AM 1570, and WNST Towson, Baltimore, and we never stop talking Baltimore sports.